All right, what's up, guys? It's me. It's your boy, Eliot. It's me, Eliot, and welcome to the Coin A Geek Gaming Podcast. This is like take number 3 for trying to get a show off the ground. Back by popular demand, I put out a poll on the Coin A Geek Facebook group, and all 15 of you responded, and more of you guys wanted me to do this than not. So this is my first foray back into doing a podcast, and I couldn't think of anybody else better to have on the show as our first guest than my old friend, and I can call him that now because we've basically known each other for 20 years and have seen each other go through weird life situations, and our friends go through marriages and divorces and kids, and it's kind of crazy how we've known each other and really have only met once in person. But that would be my good friend, Kevin Baird, the founder of Video Game News Radio. What's up, Kevin?
Hello. Hey, it's cool, man. Glad.
Yeah, man. Yeah, me too. I appreciate that you've never really turned me down when I've asked you to do something. I've been like, "Hey, man, you want to do it?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure." And I just got to think that
no life over here.
I just thought it was like,
somebody asked me to do something.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. We'll podcast for food. Yeah, no, yeah, dude. Like, it's good to be able to call upon you, and here we are all these years later. And I mean, we did a show a while ago. It was probably about a year and a half ago. That's actually stuck on on the original Coin A Geek YouTube channel that I somehow got locked out of, and I have I tried to do the whole reset password thing, but it was sending it to, they got the 2-step verification, and it was a number I completely didn't recognize. And so
there's some guy in like New Jersey, his phone like lights up all the time. So what is this?
Yeah, this is blowing up. Yeah, I did have that thought. I was like, man, somebody's really pissed at me because I'm just every 5 minutes trying to do this thing. So that channel's like basically going to be in the archives now, but I'll post the link for the old one. But yeah, to give people sort of a history, if you guys don't know, Kevin, you started, it may not be the literal first podcast on video games, but it's the first one that I knew about. Like when podcasting first came on the scene back in the day with iTunes, I remember discovering it in like 2004 and searching for video games, and you guys were like the only dudes that popped up. Is that your recollection?
Right. Well, we started on Shoutcast, and then I think we were definitely the first gaming show that was like a morning zoo type of format, as I like to call it, where you had multiple hosts just talking about video games in general. I believe the only one that predated us was Orange Lounge Radio, but I'm pretty sure at that time they just played gaming music. I don't think they had like a show, like a talk show. Now later on they did. And I don't want to say that's 100%. I don't know if they're even still around. Sure. But they weren't as popular as we were when we first started out. I mean, we blew up when Apple turned on podcasting. Yeah. And but it's funny because we were never a really serious show. I mean, it was more of a comedy thing with video game stuff in the background. Although, we did bring up a lot of like factual information that was kind of funny, like how we would go through Amazon's top selling titles of the week. And when everybody's talking about, PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo, whatever they had at the time, and you'd have Nancy Drew is number one.
Nancy Drew. Yep.
The Secret of the Old Clock. And just, week after week, like the Nancy Drew game was just outselling everything. And, and you would never hear about this sort of stuff on other shows at that time. Everybody was like way too serious. But eventually, people I think thought that there was money in podcasting, so some of the larger websites and other media outlets decided, hey, we're going to run these things too, and they created some decent shows, but then they all kind of fell off the radar because they were like, we can't actually make money at this. There's no cash. I mean, there is a Joe Rogan out there that can make money doing podcasting, but you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
It's like not. It was never a thing where there was like money waiting to be had. It was all just kind of a labor of love that would, you do this to, because you enjoy what you do. And I think that was kind of the separation. And nowadays it's kind of there's a lot of good shows out there and everything. But I think we were really unique for the time. Yeah,
I agree. This brings up memories of I think I gave up on you guys the first time. Like I listened to the show and I thought that Brian and Don were the same person for like 3 shows because their voice was so low. and it was in the background, and they were just Don and Brian, for those who don't know, who are your co-hosts for a long time. And but then I was just like, dude, what's going on here? Like, dude, these guys swear a lot. They don't see, like, two of them seem to have no idea about anything having to do with gaming. And it was just a bunch of kind of random stuff. But I remember I was like on a flight somewhere, and I was bored, and I was like, well, what else am I going to do on this flight? I'll just listen to this again. And then I got hooked on it. I got hooked on all the shenanigans. But yeah, you're hitting on something that kind of is going to tie. I'll sort of save some more of that story.
I was always kind of just real quick on that topic.
Yeah.
You know, I'm on the other side of it. I was always kind of wondering, like, what moment or thing that was said or whatever hooked people on, because most of the time it would just be like me trying to do something serious. My brother would be eating garlic bread in the background, and you know, you couldn't concentrate. There'd be like lots of yelling and screaming, and I don't know what people were like listening, and they were like, I think I'm going to keep listening to this show because it's just insane, you know. And I'm sure that's what it is, but I don't know, because a lot of times it just seems like it was a lot of noise, you know. But we had a really large audience in the beginning for quite a while, you know, until people just kind of. I think a lot of people, when podcasting first started, there was a big initial interest in it, you know, and so there was like a lot more people listening, and there's still people listening today, but I think it's harder to get new listeners to shows today because people like the shows they listen to and don't seek out a lot of shows anymore. Like,
sure.
You know, or maybe that's not a fair statement, but maybe they're seeking out more specific interests. Like there's a lot of like true crime that's like really popular. Like, sure. You know, you go on these things and there's dozens of dead body shows, as I like to call them.
Right.
And, you know, paranormal and things like that people are maybe into, I guess. And, you know, when we first started out, I think it was more just some pretty vanilla subject matter at that point. It's like news, talk, you know, and gaming was like a very short subgenre of that. But now there's just so much out there. It's a different thing.
But the thing, like, here's the thing, like, and we're talking about podcasts right now, but I think we're hitting on something that's going to get into the heart of why I wanted to have this conversation. Topic, by the way, in case you didn't read the title, is going to be about the state of the gaming industry, which I didn't plan for that to happen right after the State of the Union address. It just kind of worked out like that. But I've been thinking about how just how gaming has changed and how the culture has changed and how the you know, and the surrounding things, the ancillary things like podcasts, and how we're in this weird sort of technology age where guys like you, Kevin, and I'm younger than you, but I'm old enough to remember a time where there was no internet. And that was like half of my life, you know, that we didn't have what we have available now, and how all that transitioned. So, but going to the podcast thing, I think something that you guys have, and I think a reason, or had, I should say, and why people latched onto you is because you developed honestly, just like a love for your personalities. Like there was just this weird thing where people would want to hear Brian, you know, tell some crazy story about how he picked up a log by a burning end and tried to hit people with it, or had the red paste in his house, or, you know, all the things that would drive you crazy, like Don disconnecting. That, like, we were waiting for that, you know, because that was like part of the show, you know. And
that's very true.
I think the one time that I remember really laughing hard was the Star Force thing. And that when Star Force, and I was like, dude, this show is hilarious. And I got trying
so hard to talk about a serious subject, and they were just ruining it every chance they could get.
But now it's like I listen to some podcasts that they have that whole vibe, and that's like people. So I listen to. Do you know who Colin Moriarty is? Do you know that name?
I've heard of it, but I haven't heard his show, or if he's
okay. So he was like big at IGN for a while. He was on that PlayStation show Podcast Beyond, and he's like started kind of funny, and then split off from them. But his show has been going on for like 3 years. They got this PlayStation show, and they put a ton of work into that, but they just spun it off into this show called Constellation. And it's just him and the guests, and they're just talking about like random topics. They're not talking about gaming at all. And it's like their most popular show. And he's been on there, but like, dude, like I put no effort into this, and for some reason this is blown up. And all the shows I work really hard at, you know, just do okay. I'm like, yeah, because this was basically Midwest Wasteland, is what it is.
Right, Midwest Wasteland. That was a huge thing for our show, right? It had nothing to do with gaming, and it was our most popular, most requested series of episodes. Yeah.
So you latched onto something there. Well, cool, man. Well, So it's fun to catch up and talk about that a bit, and we'll touch back on the podcasting thing. But yeah, man, I'm going to ask you a question that you always asked us. Well, what games have you been playing lately? What have you been doing?
Currently playing Dead Space, the remake on Series X. It's okay. I mean, it's cool. It's just I've already played Dead Space, so it's just like it's Dead Space again. So okay, and I got a PlayStation 5, but it's actually disconnected at the moment. I know, crazy sounding to have something like that disconnected, but it was a debate with the girlfriend. Because she has a young daughter, and she, kind of set up a room in my house for her, which she likes and everything. And I was like, hey, I can set this up in her room, and I did and everything because she talked about wanting one. Yeah. And then it got into a debate. Well, if you set that up in there, she's going to want to take it home with her. And I'm like, oh, well, she's not taking it home with her. I mean, that's out of the question. It's mine,
Yeah.
So I ended up disconnecting it, and I haven't really found a home for it yet in the house at the moment. But that's also because I'm playing other games. And then I got Steam Deck, and I'm playing Red Dead Redemption 2. Yeah. I've played it before. I didn't finish it, so I'm just kind of now leisurely playing it on Steam Deck. So those are basically just the two things that I have current. But I have been playing quite a few miscellaneous, more independent games than AAA games. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of off the top of my head. That's where I'm at.
Cool. Yeah. So you're not playing anything new, just all old stuff.
Right. Well, Dead Space new, but not new at the same time.
Right. New coat of paint. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I get it.
Lipstick on a pig. Right.
So wait. So are you letting this girlfriend out of the basement? I remember you had like a girlfriend 10 years ago that you never wanted to talk about. You said she lived in the basement or something.
No, she lived in the basement. That's funny though. No. Yeah, I didn't like talking about that kind of stuff on the air because it was. I don't.
Nobody's going to listen to this, so don't worry.
No. I just mean like when I was dating her, we lived together for a long time, but it was always kind of rocky, and I just didn't want to air any of that on at the time. Even when like the other guys were on the show, like Don Cease went through a divorce, he talked about it later. Don Anderson, of course, was going through whatever he was going through when he was married, but mostly he talked about the problems of the marriage after. I wasn't married, but I just didn't want to talk about the situation while I was living in it, so I just kind of avoided it for the most part.
You were the only guy that didn't talk about his relationship. The other guys, Don would talk about how he had to sneak out of the barn or whatever to get signal, and he's like, "I'm out here, I got to get a smoke." Okay, cool.
Well, here on a segue, real quick, because I was always curious about this, and you probably watch and follow some things like watch YouTube videos about gaming and things of that nature. I've noticed a trend, and I'm trying to figure out if this is because YouTube's algorithm says, hey, you're almost 50 years old, so you only want to watch game show or video game shows that are run by guys in their 40s and 50s, basically, because every show that I see is run by some guy. He's got a bunch of shelves behind him full of games and consoles, and he's just talking into a microphone mad about DK oldies or something else. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, I've been watching these things every so often, and I'm going, do any young people have shows, or are they just all like, because I realize they're all playing games, right? Yeah, I know young people playing tons of games. Do they make videos and have shows? I mean, is that your experience? Am I being caught in some weird algorithm that they think I only want senior citizens to tell me about video gaming?
That's funny. No, I don't have an experience like that. I think I get kind of linked in with shows that I've watched in the past. For a while when I was trying the Twitch streaming thing, I was getting a lot of just random streamers or but people that are kind of my age and younger. So I can't say that that's my exact experience. I don't know about when you say show. Like I'm thinking about a show like This Is a Show or VGN is a show.
Like MVG, right? You got that guy. He talks about emulators and states of the industry. You've got guys.
I think though those kind of shows you have to be really good at what you do or like really interesting, right? Because here's the thing. And and I kind of feel like we're jumping all over the place, but part of what you're talking about is sort of what I've noticed in the gaming industry now and just how there's been all this crossover between gaming and podcasting and YouTube, and how they're all have kind of come into this sort of amalgamation to create this culture that has never really existed in gamers with gamers before. And so the big thing right now, right, is Twitch streaming or streaming in general. Like when COVID happened, everybody, would, for the most part, was at home. People were bored. They wanted to buy new graphics cards, and everybody took their swing at streaming, and realized, oh, this is kind of a fun thing, or I haven't gamed in a while, but I can create this community. So it's been more of that, I think, and than anything else. But the market was so oversaturated with that it's kind of like the cream rises to the top. Like, I don't know how many people who weren't podcasting before just kind of burst onto the scene. So I just kind of see the same guys that I always see, which is the dudes that I subscribe to.
Streaming's weird to me because I don't understand, and I just haven't really looked into it. Let me say that. I don't understand the ability to profit from that. Okay. Because like doing a show, YouTube has a thing. If I think like 1 million people, you get 1 million views, you get something like, I think it's $4,000 or something. Mm-hmm. So there's like there's a little bit, it depends on how many subscribers you have and how many, there's more to it than just that, but that's like a ballpark figure on a show. With streaming, I don't know how that works. Like, I don't know how, like, hey, I'm going to, do a cutie pie thing or whatever and stream myself for the next 5 hours playing a video game. Like, what's other than the Patreons and selling merch and putting NordVPN ads in your stream and all this kind of garbage, like what's the return on just streaming and being a popular streamer?
It's not good. That's why I quit. It was one of those things that was fun to do, and I'm just like, dude, I don't have the energy. Like, I like all these guys, let's go, my hair's on fire, all the transitions and everything. And I got to a point, and actually a lot of this changed for me when we found out we were going to have a kid. And I was like, dude, I got to grow up. Like, I can't be doing this stuff. I can't. And
right.
The best part about it in that regard is getting a community, but most financially, I think when you hit a certain amount of subscribers, on Twitch, you can start to receive funds. So you have your followers, guys that just like, hey, this person's going on. And then your subscribers are people kind of like a Patreon that are there to support you. Like, I'll give $1 a month or something like that. Right, and you can get a revenue. And then they could donate independently. I think I made like $150 for in like a year.
Well, it's something.
No, absolutely. I got taxed for it, so that's great. So I didn't get to keep much of it, but I do want to put a pin in this because I kind of want to rewind if we could.
Yeah.
And let's get into it. Let's talk about the state of the industry, because we're kind of talking about where we are right now. But I really want. We talked about how you said you're 51, right?
Right.
So you were born in, what is that,
72 when gaming started with the Odyssey.
Okay, so I was born in 82, so I got 10 years youth on you. But I really just want to hear your experience growing up with gaming and your kind of overall gut feeling about where the industry is today. I'm going to leave that open for now because I just want to see what your natural response to that would be.
Yeah, it's funny because I recently started doing videos and finishing off my video game collection, finishing off being open-ended since there's always new video game consoles coming out. But I purchased all of the more expensive units and basically have everything that's ever been made at this point. Mm-hmm. So I've spent a lot of time with the history making all these things. So like in the 70s, 72 to 78, when maybe the Atari 2600 came out, all we had was like Pong. So there really was no video game culture at that point, right? Sure. There was no real arcades except for some real crude parlor type games, and and calculators that played poker or blackjack or something. Like, it was real simple electronic game type stuff. So 70s didn't really count. Plus, I was a little kid, did not care. And when Atari hit the scene, that was, just a massive, commercial enterprise. It was all over TV. Video games were on the backs of cereal boxes. You could win video games. You would you'd get a pizza. There'd be arcade machines everywhere. There would be arcades. You would go to kids' birthday parties and things like that. There would be games.
Let me interrupt you. What made that shift happen? So you had the Odyssey, and it's probably, I don't know, was it just like, oh, now Atari's more affordable, or did they really take like a hard stance on marketing? Do you remember?
I think it was just Nolan Bushnell at that time was in charge of Atari, and he just started marketing it like crazy. Because Magnavox, because of the Odyssey, they owned the patents for a lot of video game stuff at that time. Okay. And so everybody had to pay them, and Bushnell tried to get around it and got sued and lost, and ended up paying them as well, because Pong was basically stolen from them. And it also became a cultural thing. Like Space Invaders was huge, Namco's Pac-Man was huge, and some of that just came out of Japan at that time, both of those games. Yeah. And it ended up feeding that fire. And there were songs on the radio. It just became cultural all of a sudden. Everybody was into it, but not you would think because of that millions and millions and millions of Atari 2600 systems were sold around it, but there really weren't that many sold versus what gets sold today.
Sure.
Like video games were not as ubiquitous, and so I would know people on the street that would have stuff, but not everybody had a 2600. To this day, I can tell you, like, the kid across the street had a 2600, but the kid next door had an Intellivision. Up the street they had like an Odyssey 2, or
Sure.
It all depended on where you landed, what your parents bought at the thrift store. There were a lot of discount, cheap systems that people thought would be like, good for the kids as an alternative for the holidays. Right. So not everybody had something, and then you had the video game crash, which really wasn't. It's called the video game crash, but it was really like a console crash. Sure. Because most people had just switched to like Apple IIs, Commodore 64s, Atari 400 computers, because there was this home computer wave at the time. It was like with 3D TV or curved TV displays, if you want to get into that, where they're telling you like, this is the future, and and people would buy into it. They'd be like, oh, I got to get one of these, but then they never use it. They're like, this is dumb. I don't want to watch TV in 3D. Right. And so that was the same thing with home computers, and they all basically became video game machines for the kids. The kids would sell their parents on it, like, I can do my homework on it, and I can do I can print things out, just and lying. You can send greeting cards, mom, and stuff, and they're like, okay, and then you just end up playing RPGs on it the entire time.
Right.
And so that there was a series of that, and then it kind of went into the Nintendo, right, came along and sort of re-energized the console interest, because the arcade was still there. The arcades were still making good games, and Nintendo was able to capitalize on their arcade games and bring Super Mario and many other titles through exclusive licenses. So the NES became a huge monster, and basically Sega was their only real competition. I mean, there were many other platforms out there attempting to do stuff, and I think later on, you got NEC with the Turbo Graphics. They were kind of like a third player in that whole thing, but it was basically those three, and really Nintendo was just dominant through all of that. And then once you get to the 16-bit era, I got back into it. Then I got a Genesis when it first came out. The Super NES wasn't an option. It didn't exist at that time.
Oh, I see.
And so you had to you either got a Genesis or you stuck with 8-bit, or maybe a Turbo Graphics, which was like a hybrid. And got that, played that for a while. Also got like an Amiga computer, so I was kind of going in between. And and then kind of just, I didn't get on board with the Super NES just because of that point in my life. I was, exiting high school or getting close to exiting high school. So wasn't really like, I don't know, in that point in my life.
It wasn't cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, I still played video games, but I was more interested in my girlfriend. I wasn't going to drop $50 on cartridges all the time and things like that. And there was also that, that shift though, where it was starting to where Blockbuster, which was, and other video rental places were renting games. So for in a lot of ways that made the market more accessible for kids, because games were still really expensive,
Yeah.
And being able to rent them was good. And that went on all the way through, like up until like the Nintendo 64, so through PlayStation, Sega Saturn a little bit. But you had all those other systems, 3DO, Atari Jaguar, all that sort of stuff. And it all it was interesting. It was an interesting time then because there were too many systems, right? There was like everybody was trying to throw in with a new game system with new features and what was going to stick, what wasn't going to stick. And, you even look back at like the original PlayStation and it didn't have the DualShock controllers. Remember, it just had like a D-pad.
Yeah, I had that.
And some buttons, right? And that was it for a couple of years or a few years until Nintendo was like, we're going to bring out an analog stick with that goofy N64 controller. But they were the first ones to do it,
Right.
And then Sony's like, well, we can do that too. We'll have two sticks in our. So everybody was kind of doing a little bit of crazy and trying to figure out what the right way to put together a game controller was, we've kind of all agreed now, I think, that, there's only slight differences really when you go to like an Xbox or even like a Switch to a PlayStation. The controllers are pretty similar now, button sizes, analog sticks, trigger buttons, bumpers. It's all, but it took a long time to get there. And that time period with 3DO and their weird connect a controller to a controller to a controller, or Jaguar had this big plastic chunky thing with number pads on it. And it was it was a wild time. I would say though that from once we had the fallout where Sega left with the Dreamcast, also a weird controller, big memory units and vibrating memory packs in it, so your controller weighs 10 pounds. But somehow the Dreamcast had, if you ever look this up, like the Dreamcast had like the greatest analog stick of all the, like they used some technology in it that made it like highly accurate, which was really surprising. I always thought the N64 one was, but no, apparently the one that was inside the Dreamcast, although the trigger buttons on the Dreamcast were garbage, the analog stick was apparently amazing. But as soon as they exited, and that left us with Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, and when GameCube basically failed, sorry everybody, it did. Not saying it sucked, but it failed. That just left two.
You said GameCube. Oh, okay.
Yeah. That just left the two. It just left Sony and Microsoft, and Nintendo has been kind of releasing interesting but low-powered systems ever since. Yeah. And that's kind of where we are today. We've got two systems, Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 that are very similar in performance, and we have basically an Android handheld from Nintendo. Those are the three platforms that exist right now, and it's interesting. It's funny because my girlfriend's daughter is 10 years old, and she has a Switch, and she spends all of her time on the iPad. They play games with their friends on the iPad like all the time. Like the Switch, it gets a little bit of love once in a while, like when maybe their friends aren't online or something, but it's not the choice thing to do. They're playing what is that, Roblox and Minecraft and all these other things on that platform, which I never really consider those things gaming platforms. They're just tablets, and a lot of those games I find to be simple or not so great, but younger gamers are all about it, and they've grown up with that interface. They've grown up with the touch screen. I want a controller, just I want that technical feel and all of the buttons, tactile feel, but they don't care about any of that. They're used to touching the screen and moving things around with their fingers and everything. And look at Pokemon Go; it was a huge success for mobile. So it's an interesting time with gaming, because on top of that, we also have this sort of free to play Fortnite kind of universe where you can jump in and play a game for free with your friends, and you don't necessarily have to spend a bunch of money. You just have to, you can just jump in and have a good time. So millions of people are playing that, or one of these other things. And these companies make money because they know eventually you're going to want a skin or a feature, an outfit or something, and they sell these things. But that's keeping a huge pool of gamers outside of traditional console gaming that you and I grew up with, which is still very popular. But I think it's diminished a lot in the sense of we don't have nearly as many producers of video games on these platforms like we used to. There are independent games, but it seems like there's independent studios that are sort of lower budget, and then you've got big games that are AAA titles. But that middle ground that used to be occupied by Midway, Acclaim, I can't think of a ton of them off the top of my head, but you know what I mean. There were lots of these sort of like in between, like Sega would be a good one right now. Sega's not making any like AAA games really at this point in their they don't have enough money to really invest in that kind of thing.
Sonic Frontiers, my friend. Come on.
Maybe. Right. But they're kind of like in they're not saying they don't make good games, but they're not spending like the hundreds of millions of dollars to make a Red Dead 2 kind of thing. And we used to have more of that when gaming was younger, and now it's like it's become a different thing, and it's still great. There's still tons of games and everything, but I do find that there's less choice because most of the big companies are really playing it safe and sort of re-releasing the same type of game over and over again. Occasionally we get something new and original, but we do every year it's the Madden effect. We do kind of get the same kind of, hey, here's another Call of Duty, here's another,
Well, they know Kevin Baird's going to buy Dead Space again. So
right. Let's make another Dead Space. Right. It's an interesting thing. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's good. You covered pretty much the entire history of video games. But my question, and I do want to comment on some of the things you said, but my question is, do you like where the gaming industry is currently?
I think Nintendo is in trouble. And I think that
we've been saying that for 15 years, by the way. Right?
I like
since the Dolphin.
I mean, their stock forecast just recently they just released 18 cents per share. They took a big dip. They're down to like $9 a share right now. They have like nothing planned really after Zelda for the rest of this year. That's the forecast they gave the stock holder people. They're looking. That's why they're not going to be at E3. They basically said, we don't really have anything to show for the second half of 2023. So that means that this Switch Pro or maybe a VR helmet or whatever they're planning on doing is probably, it is Nintendo. They're pretty good at hiding things. Maybe they're going to drop a bomb and we'll all be shocked, but it sounds like they're not going to do anything much this year except release games for the Switch. The Switch is really dated. It doesn't have enough power to play a lot of stuff. So a lot of stuff is streaming, that they're doing streaming gaming because it doesn't have enough memory in it. And, gamer or developers have complained about this and it's just it's been out for like 6 years and it wasn't super powerful when it first launched. It was cool, but it wasn't super powerful. And, we're in a different world and we're going to have to wait another year. And Nintendo, historically, the Nintendo that we grew up with had more than one game system. Sure. They had the 3DS and they also had, one of the various consoles or a 2DS or a Game Boy Advance. I mean, but now they just have one. And if they don't have something to sell, it's really going to hurt their bottom line. And they're still doing all right. They're still selling Switches everywhere and they can cut the prices and do all those things. I'm not saying they're going to go out of business, but I think they're just not in a healthy position. So
does that worry you then as like a gamer that's been around for a while?
I know they're still going to release hardware. They're planning on doing something that seems like, there's been enough stuff out there that it's going to be interesting and they still release very high quality software. So I'm not too worried about it or anything, but I think where a Nintendo could run into a problem is that they could at some point, if their stock dips low enough, they could be subject to a hostile takeover. They could be bought out by a Disney, for instance, or somebody that wants their IP and maybe has less interest in their overall culture And
they're about to come out with that movie though, and
right,
if
that might
if
blow
that
them up.
movie's a hit, like you saw what happened with Sonic. I haven't seen. Did you fall down? Are you all right?
No, so some just fell. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm falling.
This is
I
it.
can't get up.
It's a stroke.
Talking about Nintendo.
Oh my god. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, the movie's coming out.
The movie's coming out. Movie's coming out. Sonic was an unexpected hit, right? Like, who thought Sonic would be such a big deal for the kids this age that don't know anything about the OG Sonic, pretty much? And so all right. So let me give you some of my thoughts as you were talking.
Yeah.
One of the really big reasons I wanted to bring up this topic is because since turning 40 last July, and becoming a dad and all these things and basically growing up in some ways, I feel like those dudes, maybe how you guys feel about the music scene, where you can remember the days where metal was popular and it was good, and you had like a metal scene, right? And it was just for you guys. It was the metalheads. Like, that was your subculture. Right. And then it becomes popular, and then you get glam rock, and then then it kind of morphs into something else. And now it's fun because it's retro, and Stranger Things is doing Metallica and everything, but it's not. It's now just industrialized and kind of taken away from you in a weird sense. Now, that probably happens to everybody, but I think we're in this weird age, right? Like, you've known me long enough. You know me more as Jedi Hillis than Eliot. And so Jedi Hillis was obviously my gamer tag and still is, and grew up a huge Star Wars fan. And I'm seeing this happen. I've seen this happen to my beloved Star Wars, where it's like, oh, wow, we had the original trilogy, and those were beloved. But still, dude, like, when I was in high school, if I wore a Star Wars shirt, dude, I was getting made fun of. I was getting punched. Right,
sure.
That was in the year 2000, and the prequels came out that nobody liked those, and which is hilarious because now they're beloved apparently by certain people. But it's just but now it's so everywhere that the product is diluted and it doesn't feel like special. And everybody's wearing this, and that's gaming and comic books and Star Wars. These things are things that used to just be for nerds, basically, right?
Yeah, right.
And we prided ourselves on that. It was like, okay, I'm going to listen to VGN because there aren't any shows about gaming, and we create this community, we create this bond. But now it gets caught up into the media storm, into all these conglomerates, and now it's like, well, now it's just about making money, and it's about churning out as much of this as possible, and it's taken away kind of what's made things special. And I think I've seen that happen in the gaming industry as well. I agree with you about the safety of where game developers are, and for me, I feel like even though it wasn't the absolute best hardware, I really feel like the PS3, Xbox 360 era was kind of the peak of our creativity, in a sense of like, okay, we have this new technology now that could do really realistic graphics. Online was just really becoming a thing, right? Like, your Call of Duty wouldn't have been Call of Duty without the 360. And but you still had companies like Sony doing like Little Big Planet at the same time as doing The Last of Us, and all the weird in betweens, right? And that's when like the indie gaming scene really came on. So now it's like, okay, indie gaming has a niche, but now if you go on the PlayStation Store, it's just a bunch of shovelware, and you don't even know what's good. So it's it's like what you said about podcasts, where it's like, dude, I don't even know what to look for. So I'm just going to kind of stay in my lane. Like, maybe somebody will tell me to check this game or this show out. And it's the same thing. I'm still relying upon the people that I listen to, the podcasts I listen to, or just maybe a random friend that's like, hey, you should try this game out. And we're kind of beholden to that rather than me discovering it on my own. So that's where I'm I don't want to say I'm down on the industry, but I do worry a little bit with the advent of like Fortnite. I remember hearing something crazy about like Fortnite is I know it's a popular game, and it's probably a really good game. I don't play it very much, but the money that Fortnite plays, like I think God of War just crossed like 11 million units sold. The money that they made on that, it doesn't even touch what Fortnite makes, per
Right.
month practically, because they're selling them on skins, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like, so now I'm like in the grumpy old man phase where I'm like, oh, these kids are going to grow up and they're not going to even know what a good game is, and like they, you know, they didn't suffer what I suffered or whatever, and I feel like just I worry about the industry just becoming this thing where we only have the only things people are willing to spend money on are the massive AAA games, which come out every 3 to 5 years because they're
Right.
super expensive. And so we got to wait for like these massive games to come out, or it's just going to be all these, you know, what do they call it? Not play to win, but it's like a games as a service, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, hey, well, we'll put out Overwatch 2 for free, but you're gonna pay 10 times the amount by the end of it because you want the new sexy diva skin or something.
Right.
So that kind of depresses me in a sense, and so that's kind of my view of the industry. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or if you're
Well, I think games like Fortnite, we've had the like StarCraft. Remember that was big, right?
Oh,
And then of course we had MMOs, Warcraft. You know, these things are still out there. I mean, people played Ultima Online. I'm sure it's still running somewhere on some server in someone's closet that's still making, you know, people are playing it.
with Ashwin's call,
and I think that group is always kind of around in that sense, that there's a focus on, you know, a particular game. But I think that young people like Roblox, I was watching this thing where, like, you know, people talk about the metaverse, Facebook spending billions of dollars trying to build this VR metaverse, and the reality is that Roblox seems to be what that is. Like, there's kids on there building entertainment games or areas within that system, and they make, like, this one girl made like $500,000 last year, just by her and, you know, creating using the tools that they give her to build the experiences that she liked, that other girls liked, that wanted to buy into this thing. So I think, you know, it's kind of that fourth wall, like you were saying, the nerd culture. It's been knocked down now, and everybody's playing some kind of something, and now it's more genre specific. The girls aren't sneering at you because you're playing video games. They're sneering at you because you're playing Fortnite instead of Roblox, you know. And I think that's a different thing for us. But the money, like you're talking about, is where the big industry always tries to go. Because if you remember, I'm sure you do, when MMOs were first kicking off and you had the popularity of like Warcraft, like every company on earth was trying to release an MMO,
right?
And they all sucked. I mean, they all were terrible. You know, but they kept touting new features and different things, etc., to, you know, licenses and everything, and you know, and I would say maybe within the last 10 years we've seen a lot of that with open world. Hey, this game's open world, you know, and a lot of those games suck too, because you know, you're just kind of like in the middle of no idea where you're going, what you're supposed to do. I think even in the last few years we've had a lot of these survival games, like, we're just gonna put you like in the middle of a forest, and you gotta hatchet and watch out for the wolves. They're gonna eat you at night and stuff. And everybody tries to make that, and you know, it's like this constant competition. I'm always impressed by all these independent people that sit down and make video games, because it's like, first of all, that's got to be hard. And just getting the assets together, like the art and everything, into a game to make it, you know, and debug it and have it be fun and stuff. It's amazing that they spend the time to do it. And because I don't think very many of them are making anything at all. You know, they're losing their shirts trying to make these video games. And so you're right. That leaves like your big companies, which are all, you know, eating each other right now too. You know, Microsoft going out and buying Bethesda, wanting to buy Activision, probably will at some point. You know, just a lot of purchasing or merging, and you know, Electronic Arts is notoriously quiet for a company that constantly would buy out other companies. I'm not sure what's up with them. But you know, I think it's just telling, like, nobody quite knows where to go, but it always changes. and the next big thing is going to probably change it again, and where everybody's sitting right now is going to get shaken up. I don't know, but I think that the traditional model, it's still here, but I think we may be nearing the end of console iterations like we know it, because it's slowed down quite a bit, right? You're right. PlayStation 3 cell processor, right? Custom chips, really trying to set themselves apart, being a little bit different, and whether that was successful or not, that was kind of the last of it. Now it's kind of like all pretty much, a little bit different architectures, but off the shelf chips, not too much difference between Microsoft and Sony in that case, and Nintendo's kind of going with generic hardware from Nvidia. And so, it's like, do they need to upgrade? And I'm not sure they're sure. Like Xbox was really interesting to me, and I talked about this before on one of my shows, was the fact that like the Xbox Series X, the Xbox One X, which was the high-end Xbox, was more powerful than the current Series S. The Series S has, some more modern graphical features you can use, right? Sure. Ray tracing and things of this nature. But it has less RAM and less overall processing power. And it doesn't really do 4K where the Xbox One X did. And it's funny because as soon as they launched that, Microsoft was like, stop making the One X. We don't want anybody to have that.
Yeah,
it's bad. But that kind of shows you that they didn't really make a big evolution in technology here, and it wasn't a big leap. And I still go on YouTube and I see these videos where people are like comparing the graphical differences between PS4 and PS5 games. Like you've got to like watch a video to see what you might be missing if you're playing that same game on the PlayStation 5, because the jump isn't that substantial.
They did the little screen wipe and it looks exactly the same.
right. Exactly.
Like, why'd I buy this?
Or it's got some plants in the background because they're using the ray tracing. Look at the reflection in the water. Okay, well the game is the same game. It looks exactly the same. So and yet they want people to go out and spend to $500. So people are doing it, but I think the people that are doing it are learning now that maybe these upgrades aren't like they're like they used to be. The jump isn't as big,
right? And
so now we're at a point where, is there going to be another jump? I don't know. I mean, maybe eventually, but I mean it was streaming and the fact that most of these companies don't really want to sell physical media anymore. I wonder if there's, and they don't want to really introduce new features in terms of hardware. I wonder if they're even going to want to bother with another iteration of console. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like this conversation's been going on for a while in terms of like getting rid of the console, and I think if, like you said, if the companies had their way, they probably would. But then that's also, I think, kind of shifted with the zeitgeist in terms of people thinking that, well, single player games are dead, but then God of War comes out and sells 20 million units.
Right,
like, well, that's not true.
I don't think that's true. Single player is huge.
Yeah. So like that's a good transition. We talked about Nintendo. I wanted to talk about each kind of company and where they were at. So we talked about Nintendo a bit, and I think this is a good segue into PlayStation because you had said you had a PlayStation 5 over there collecting dust, and but I think, now we're starting to see iteratives of the same console within the same generation cycle, right? So we had the PlayStation 4 Pro, and it's like, well, this is basically like back in the day when Nintendo used to add the extra memory or the, it wasn't the Rumble Pack. It was that graphics enhancer for Star Fox 64. That was just like an add-on.
Yeah.
But now, what I think they're going to do is I think they're going to come out with a PS4 Pro or PS5 Pro that will allow games to basically run in their fidelity mode, but run at a higher frame rate, because these games that have as soon as you turn on the ray tracing, to me, it's not worth it. It's just like like the 30 frames, 20 to 30 frames a second for some freaking glare on your motorcycle. in Cyberpunk is not worth the 60 frame second trade-off. So, but I think they'll do that. And I also agree with you that I think they're going to try to get rid of physical media. They can't quite get there yet, but what I think will happen is that they'll put out a version of the PS5 that they're just going to make a PS5 Slim or something like this, and then they'll have an additional like external CD drive that you can just plug in. So it's optional, right? And I bought the one, or I didn't buy it, somebody gave it to me, but I have the one that has the disk drive, and I barely ever use it. And I'm just like, man, if I could not have this and save $100, I probably should have done that.
Yeah, no, I'm the opposite. I have the disk drive and I've got stacks of games for it.
But you're a collector though too.
Yeah, but I think that it is, to me, it's the resale value down the line. You can resell the games, you get part of your money back. I come from a different generation where saving money makes sense. All the games on your PlayStation 5, if you wanted to sell it, you can't really give it to them without giving up your identity. So, you're screwed. You got to own it for life. And then, I've lived long enough to know, and we've also seen, just like with them closing down Wii Store, and they're going to close down PS3 and Vita here. If they haven't done it already, they're just close. And something else is just about to get closed down too. I just got something. Oh yeah, Sony's closing down their what is that? If you're a PlayStation Plus member or whatever, they have that games for PlayStation or something. So they're closing,
they're taking that away.
They're taking that away from you, and so you don't own any of that content, and so that you could never play it again once they get rid of it. And to me, that's they do things though, like on PlayStation 3, I can go on and I can play Ico or Shadow of the Colossus, because I purchased it on that store. But if I go to PlayStation 4, I can't play those games. I have to buy the remake ones. I can't actually take the ones in my collection and play them on PlayStation 4. So it actually was a struggle for me to put the PlayStation 3 into storage, because there were a lot of games on there I enjoyed playing that I can't play anymore because I can't get at them even as the systems upgrade unless I want to pay more money.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I just think you're in the minority now. Like,
I am absolutely.
I say that because I'm in the opposite boat, and I consider myself a pretty serious gamer, or as much as I can be. But oh my gosh, can you hear my kid screaming? She's like,
no, I can't actually.
Okay, good. All right, it's coming through the baby monitor, and it's so loud. But I think, again, this is just where I'm at in my state of life. I don't have as much time to play games. I think a lot of people that are in my age bracket, not everybody, right? Not everybody gets married and has kids and does all that. I'm not saying right or wrong here. I'm just saying there are quite a few people that they get to a certain point, and it's like, man, I wish I had time to go back and play these games. I do, but I don't, and I don't care as much as I thought I would. Even the PS4 games that came out, a lot of these games ran at like 30 FPS. And so if they release a new version of it, or it's like, hey, freaking GTA 5 has been out since PS3, and they've reiterated on that now, what, 3 times. And it's just like, well, I'll buy it again. And if it has better graphics, or if it can run better. I think there's a part of me that always thinks that I'm going to want to go back and play those games. But that's like after I, am getting cancer treatment and stuff, and I can't do anything else.
Oh, right. I have way more games than I'm ever going to get to. Steam, I have way more games than I'm ever going to play.
But I agree with you in principle. Like I don't. You want to be able to sell your games, but I just don't see that happening. Like, the brick and mortar stores are going away. Everybody hates GameStop, and I think most kids these days are super ADHD, and they're just going to forget about it. It's going to be like, up on to the next thing. And,
I think that it's a larger discussion. It's probably beyond the scope of this, but it's a lot of what we talk about in that kind of a sense is dependent upon the marketplace in general staying as healthy as it is today. And I don't think in the long run that's going to be the case. I don't think the United States is necessarily going to stay as healthy as it is. We're kind of in a downturn right now economically. We'll probably see some ups and downs. But I think that if you have any kind of political eye on things, we're borrowing all our money. We're $30 trillion in debt, and the dollar is still strong, but the dollar is still strong because of derivatives, and I'm not going to get into that. But at some point, all of this is going to kind of have to be paid for, and our economy, you know, it's not like we're all going to be in the poorhouse and everything's going to be bad. There's lots of people that are going to tell you all that kind of stuff. It's not what's going to happen, but we're going to be stagnant. We're going to be really stagnant for a while. The market's not really going to rise. Everything's going to be kind of flat. We're kind of dealing with higher prices now, etc. And money that's going to go into gaming is going to start to dry up as people, like you were saying earlier, only want to pay for the AAA games, etc., which is going to shrink the market. Mm-hmm. And the expectations that people have today with like, hey, we kind of all want to play Mother 3. Let's all get together and ask them to make a remake for it. And they're going to be like, too expensive, too much money. We're not going to do it. And a lot of these things are just going to kind of, you know, be drifting into the secondhand market. And I don't know if you've seen prices on the secondhand market.
Oh, they're crazy right now.
They're crazy because people do want to play those old games. And, you know, they want to add them to their collections, et cetera. But they also, there's tons of people that want to play them, and the development's not happening, and it's going to get worse. And I think that the convenience factor that people have, like take it away from video games. Like look at Spotify, for instance. People Apple iTunes, the music industry has long been kind of in this weird kind of thing with streaming, but a lot of that has got to do with some antiquated laws that are changing. And when they start to, finalize and get completely changed out, they're going to start charging more for music. And people are not going to want to pay $30 a month for Spotify or music. And so they're going to start buying songs again. Now, I'm not saying we're going to go all the way back in time and start buying cassette tapes or shit like that. But what I'm saying is that, some of the conveniences that we have, because we're living in a very wealthy society right now, we're going to start to feel more like it's the 1970s in a way, where it's going to be a long stretch of like 10 years where things are really flat and money is going to become a lot harder to make decisions on what you want to spend it on. And this is going to change gaming, and gaming's still going to be around. I'm not saying anything like that, but I think we're going to see like a real sort of paradigm shift, and maybe people that are sitting on old Super NES cartridges, they might have something where they can sell it later on, and have cash. And, you might be playing your PlayStation 5 for the next 10 years, and that's fine. Some of these consoles are supposed to last 10 years, right?
So you're saying you're gonna discover a prepper with a basement full of Mario Kart?
That's what some of these guys on YouTube look like. They got stacks of games. It's so ridiculous. I know it, but I think that we have to keep an eye on it, because what we've lived through in the last 20 years has been really unique. I mean, this isn't happening in any other country, really. Japan a little bit, right? But Japan had an unusual economic crisis there too, and they've kind of stepped away from home consoles. They just kind of embraced handhelds from Nintendo, probably because of more dollars and cents than anything else. But the rest of the world doesn't really spend a lot of time with these kinds of things. It's very first world problem, as we like to say,
Sure.
We may be coming to a slowdown with it for quite a long time, and it's not unusual. I mean, look, in the 70s when we had Pong for like 10 years before there was anything else. 8-bit, like the NES had a long run, as an 8-bit console that everybody had, etc. Even the PlayStation, the first PlayStation, had a very long run of 10 years. I mean, when they released it as that what they called the PS, what was it, the PS1, which was that little one with the flip up screen you could buy for it. That sold more than the PlayStation 2 did that year when that came out, and it was 8 years after it ran. And I think these things kind of go in cycles, and we may be heading for that kind of a cycle in the gaming industry. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out. I'm interested to see, back to Nintendo real quick. I'm interested to see what Nintendo does, because I don't think they're coming out with a Switch Pro, because Miyamoto, however you say his name, had said, we're really only interested in releasing hardware if it changes the experience,
Right.
and that's what Nintendo does, of course, is everything is, the Wii Remote or the Wii U detachable controller, or whatever, and then the 2 controllers on the Switch.
Right.
It sounds like they're going to release something, and I was sitting there trying to think to myself, like, what can Nintendo do? And I really kind of think they might be moving towards a VR headset kind of thing.
Sure.
It's popular in Japan, but it's not that affordable in Japan. And Nintendo's great at making things affordable, and they could use less, powerful screens and do things in a different way. They've already dabbled in a lot of this with the 3DS being 3D. Of course, they had the Virtual Boy, which is a total failure, but that was ages ago.
Yeah.
And they have this sort of, I think, this Japan has this sort of tight, you're just, everybody's kind of locked into these small rooms kind of thing, and you put the headset on and it blows this whole thing open for you, and you can be inside this new world. And maybe it's something like that, maybe not exactly that, but I can't see them just coming out with like a Switch Pro. It's just not Nintendo. It's not them to just be like, hey, here's the same thing, but it's faster. Like that's not going to energize anybody from Nintendo.
Well, they tried that with like the Wii U, right?
Right.
That didn't go over well.
Right.
So,
and I think Sony's going to be the winner here in terms of PlayStation 5 versus Xbox. Microsoft's in some weird. I mean, why did they name this what they did? It's so confusing.
It's very confusing.
It's hard to even talk to people anymore. When you say Xbox, I don't know what you're talking about. And and if I say Series X or Series S, unless you're really in the know, you have no idea what I'm even saying. Like it makes no sense. It doesn't have a common name. And I don't think they're done. I think they're looking at Steam Deck probably, and they're probably thinking to themselves, like, that's a threat. It runs on Linux. It could eat up Microsoft's market share. So I'm sure they're in some boardroom right now thinking, hey, maybe we should come out with an Xbox Series P for portable and release that portable Xbox we've been talking about to take on Steam Deck, because it seems like they're leaving money on the table if they don't, because Steam Deck's a nice piece of kit, and Valve really got it right. And it's gonna eat into Microsoft. So and I don't think that. Look, I like the consoles; they all work fine. Even though the Xbox Series X is, it's basically just a big black box, right? It's just like it's just like a brick,
the board cube,
right? Exactly. You got these two wild-looking consoles this generation. They couldn't make these things smaller, really. They're just they're both so ridiculous. And it's like the PlayStation
didn't want it to overheat, so you got to put a giant fan in there.
And the PlayStation is just like, so large and awkward underneath the TV. It's like, it's just bizarre what both of them did. I don't understand it.
Well, let me piggyback a bit on this PlayStation, because we're doing a good job going through these companies, but I think, so we've got the PSVR 2, which is right around the corner. Right. I assume you're going to get one at some point. I don't know if you pre-ordered it or not.
No, I don't pre-order, but I will. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's one kind of step out into, no, I wouldn't say it's not uncharted territory at this point, but it's doing something different, right?
Yeah.
Xbox isn't doing that. Nintendo hasn't done anything like that yet.
Right.
And so they're taking one gamble there. I still think that audience isn't there. I don't think VR is going to honestly be really big until maybe Nintendo does something like you said, but I really think it's going to be Apple. Apple's going to have to come out with a VR unit that everybody just thinks is amazing.
Well, I think you're right, but I think you're right that it's not there. But I think what it is that you've got to get the Fortnite of VR. You've got to find the killer app, the killer title for VR that it just doesn't exist yet. There's a lot of good experiences on VR, but there's nothing where, I've got Oculus, I've got PlayStation VR. I had 2 Oculuses. I gave one to Karate Dog. And I don't come home and think like, well, that was a hard day at work. Let me strap this head thing to my head and blast my eyes out some more playing some VR. But I know people that enjoy some of the social aspects of it, watching movies with friends or meeting up in VR because they're living, distances away. And I think that aspect of it is appealing to a certain subgroup, but I still think it lacks a killer title. And there again, if Nintendo does it, maybe they can convince people that, hey, there's a new Mario and he's in VR, or there's a Zelda, or there's a Metroid in VR, because they whether they can get new people, their pre-baked audience is so dedicated to them that they will all just love it just to love it.
Well, they're gonna have to convince the parents that it's safe for their kids to have this thing strapped to their head. Right. Yeah, but so there's the VR aspect of it. But here's something that, okay, for me, I'm a PlayStation guy. I've been a PlayStation guy since the first one. That's my go-to console. I really stick around with PlayStation because I like their first party games. I think I'm kind of married to that. But what PlayStation is, I feel like if I'm looking at their strategy here from a bird's eye view, they're banking a lot on that. They're dipping their toe back into VR again. They've kind of given up on the handheld console, at least for now. Although I think what you said about the Steam Deck could change a lot of that. But here's the other aspect of something that they're doing, and they've kind of hit some success here recently with licensing out their IPs into TV shows and movies. So what is your feeling about seeing these franchises like The Last of Us get taken up by HBO? Do you think that's a valid long-term strategy? Do you have any personal feelings about seeing maybe games and stories that you like becoming a TV show? Like, does that make you feel one way or another about it?
I mean, if it's good, if it's good, they do a good job at, because historically they don't, but if they do a good job at it, then that's fine. I don't think it's going to make them much money. I mean, every $100 million they make is great, but looking at, like, say, again, like, Nintendo's easy to look at, and I bring them up because they're doing one thing. Sony's harder to look at their bottom line because they're selling TVs and radios and all sorts of other things. But Nintendo's basically, other than some playing cards and things, they're just selling video games. And so they're moving like $4.3 billion in gaming, right? So if they make $100 million or even $1 billion off of their movie, once you separate all, they won't, that's the revenue. Once they break it, the hundreds of millions of dollars, it's nice, but that's not going to keep them afloat. You know what I mean? So we've seen a lot of that in the past, especially in Japan. They had theme parks, and we see licensing everywhere. I think it's good if they do it right. But we got into this, you and I got into gaming because the experiences in gaming are much deeper than they are on TV or in movies, right? It's relaxing to sit and watch a movie and do things in TV, but you're not a part of it. And when you're playing the games, and they're good games, you are a part of it. You're in the experience, and you're experiencing a connection there that's you're not going to get. So it's okay, but people that want that kind of thing, is just, I don't know. Just make the games better, man. let's play more games. Let's make good games. Let's spend the $100 million on making a great game.
Yeah. So I know it's getting late over there. I didn't want to keep you too much longer, but
no, it's okay. I just going back to Sony though, I think VR, they have obviously development and plans for it. I think it's popular in Japan, and it's probably what's driving it more than it's being driven by the United States or Europe for sure, or any of the other countries around the world. It's probably there, but I think that Sony has momentum on their side this time around. Like, they did well with PlayStation 4 versus Xbox One, but I think that 360 kind of bit into PS3, and so Xbox One versus PlayStation 4 was kind of say like a tie. I also think both those consoles didn't have a great number of games versus consoles that came before, like good games. It seemed a bit limited.
I agree. I think the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 2 are very similar to me. Like they had, like I remember some really great games for PlayStation 1, and then PlayStation 2. I mean, I know there were good games, but it kind of all blends together. That was like the era of like Madden and I guess GTA 3 was
Gran
probably
Turismo and
yeah. And then PS4 was kind of iterative in many ways. It's like, well, here's the next Uncharted, and then and here's the next Last of Us, and I worry about that for Sony in a way where that's like Nintendo's MO. It's like every time a new Nintendo console's out, you're always going to need a Mario, a Zelda, a Metroid. I don't want Sony to become that and just be like, well, we need a new Last of Us now. We need a new Uncharted or whatever. But I think PlayStation 4 like far outsold the Xbox One by like millions.
Oh, I'm sure it did. Yeah.
But
I think the experiences were the same. I think here it's going to be different because I think that Sony has now put itself into a position where, like, Microsoft seems to be entrenching itself. It's like we can't necessarily guarantee that we're going to get the best experiences on the Xbox. So we're going to buy these companies.
That's kind of a crappy. Yeah, I think that's kind of like a crappy thing to do. And like it's like when EA bought up a bunch of companies, and then all of a sudden, we're going to buy BioWare. Then all of a sudden, Mass Effect wasn't good anymore.
Right.
And it's like you get the same feeling from Microsoft. It's like they don't even know how to handle their, like, the biggest example. Why is Halo not the best freaking looking game on the planet? It just looks like that would be. I mean, let's compare them to Naughty Dog, right? Whatever you think about their games, how they play, they always are a system seller, and they always push the envelope at the time. You're like, wow, that looks incredible. Like the Halo Infinite was shown, and it had to go back in the box for like another year because it looked so bad. And I'm like, how do you let your flagship title handle this? And then why, as a company, if you care at all about your IP, not saying they do outside of dollars, why would you want to submit yourself to that? It's almost like Xbox is just kind of, they bought all these studios, right? Like that, they were like, oh, we're going to buy Ninja Theory, and we're going to buy these things. We're going to see this swath of games, and we haven't seen anything from them in a while. So yeah, I don't really understand, outside of what you said, with their strategy of buying up companies. Like how are they going to win? I think it's over for them.
I think that these independent companies like CD Projekt Red, that have a passion for what they're doing and make, that they spend the time and make the games as good as they can. They get bugs, Bethesda was kind of in this way too. Like, as much as everybody's played Skyrim on every electronic device that's ever been made, it wasn't without its bugs and weird, goofy features and things like that, but it has this sort of charm because it's this, it's outside of this corporate thing, and they can do things. But now that it gets all corporate, it's it's all going to get sterilized and loot crated and shrunk down in scope and all these things to make deadlines, and it's not going to, I mean, I'd like to be wrong, but I just think that the culture won't necessarily be there. That the people that own the company probably cash out on the sale, they leave, and the weirdest thing was Bungie, right? Bungie was bought by Microsoft and then somehow paid themselves to get out of it. I've never heard of something like that before. It's the strangest thing ever.
I know. Then they got bought out by Activision, and now they're out of that. Right. Now Sony owns them. So
it right. And it's so, what a bizarre story that is. It could be a movie in itself. But I think Sony, but listen, I don't want Microsoft to fail, because if Sony stands alone, then quality also suffers, because you have to have competition.
Sure.
And Nintendo's not going to be it. Nintendo's just going to be in a different place. And if Sony decided, hey, we're just going to go up against Nintendo, then, the hardware quality would go way down, right?
Yeah.
Because Nintendo is generations behind, and just maybe the PC would thrive at that point and become the next best thing. I don't know.
So you're hitting on that. Let's finish up with the Xbox here. Like, I think you said something that I hadn't thought about before, but I wonder if Microsoft comes out with something like a Game Pass console. Now that's a little harder maybe because those games rotate through Game Pass, right? As opposed to Steam, when you buy them, you have them.
Sure.
But Game Pass seems to be like, at least from the people that I listen to, and the draw for me is that if I were an Xbox gamer, especially if I were like a kid with no job, like it'd be so much easier. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Like you'd be like, "Hey, mom, it's only $5 a month, and I can play all these games," right?
Right.
And so there's that value proposition there, but I don't know if that's enough, because it kind of goes back to the problem of like there's just too many games in too little time. So I don't
Right.
know how you feel about that strategy, and if that's something that's appealing to you personally.
I mean, I use that service and I play games to check them out on there,
Mhm.
and it's quite large, and and I certainly don't play all the games on there, but and I do the same with what Sony has offered,
Yeah,
and I'm always just looking for deals and things like that. I hate paying full price for anything. Once in a while, I'll do it, but I don't. I think games are overpriced in general.
sure.
I can see a movie for $15, and they spent $100 million to make the movie or more. You spent $100 million to make the video game. Why is it $70?
Yeah,
And to be fair, there are some experiences in video games that are worth that kind of money for sure, but most of the stuff that we get is not worth that kind of money,
sure.
and yet they've made these sort of uniform pricing across the board, which I think also screws gaming up. So these Game Pass things, they're a good idea. And you're right, they could make a streaming console, or if they can get the latency down in such a way, maybe Microsoft has enough data centers and services and things to give you that kind of bandwidth to make it workable. But I think historically we have all known that that doesn't really work that well for people. But I don't know, some of that's changing. I've seen some reviews about from different people talking about the difference between Steam Deck and some of these clone systems, and a lot of people say, like, I like the Steam Deck, but it's heavy and it's bulky, and when I want to just stream games online, I'll reach for this other one that's really light and easier to play. And I never really think of that because I don't really stream games online, but I guess some people do. And so maybe that would be also, because you could make a system and make it really cheap and allow it to stream games, and it would probably, if you put a Sony or a Microsoft brand or Nintendo branding on it, it would sell really well. I mean, the Switch is almost there. It doesn't have very much in it. Sorry, Nintendo lovers. I mean, I've been promoting Nintendo all show, but it's 6 years old now. Let's just be fair. So we'll see what their next generation is, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's, when you're talking about companies, you're talking about games, you want to have good games and everything, but you also, like, it's cyclical. So they get like a bunch of profit and investment and things when these consoles initially launch. And then you kind of are at the mercy of selling big name titles. And so they have to launch a Call of Duty. They have to launch a God of War. They got to do a Mario or a Zelda, because that's what the market reacts for. And releasing new IP is a risk. And sometimes it works out. You get a Splatoon like Nintendo did, and it goes over really well in Japan. Pikmin, not so much,
Yeah.
It's out there. But every so often you get a new an update. Now, does that work for a company like, say, whoever owns Fortnite? Like, hey, we're releasing new skins this month. Does that help their I don't know. I have no idea. It's like, are they transitioning into something else? And you get things like Destiny and stuff where they try to make a new IP that's going to catch on, but it gets overshadowed by something else. Gaming's hard. It's hard to know where the industry is going to go. We'll get another Assassin's Creed and whatever various Battlefield,
Eventually.
Battlefield Bahamas, whatever. Go ahead.
I think you said on one of your shows on VGN, you made a very definitive statement that eventually every single game will be remade, or it'll have a have a
Right.
sequel. You're like, eventually, if the industry lasts long enough.
Well,
So
it's
yeah,
easy money, and if Dead Space has sold really well, which it might have, or at least sold enough, it might actually cause them to do more of this, which is to take an old IP that was popular and to modernize it. They've done that, of course, but they've mostly done it graphically. They've mostly said, "Hey, let's upgrade the graphics on it." Where with Dead Space, they actually improved it in a lot of ways and added additional lore and things to the game to kind of beef it up a little bit and make it a little bit more interesting. Corrected some of the play elements that were a little sludgy, and made it an overall better game. And if they
yeah,
can do that rather than just upgrade the graphics, then they might have a market there for some games. But you got to be real picky about which games you want to try to do this with, because I mean, nobody's really going to buy an upgraded version of Conker's Bad Fur Day or something. It's you got to be real choosy, and I don't know.
it is interesting, man. I'm starting. This is kind of, I don't want to go on and long about this, but I feel like games that were popular, and genres that were popular, like I feel like there's a resurgence of survival horror.
Yeah,
Resident Evil's as big as it's ever been. Dead Space, same thing. They're kind of piggybacking on that. We're seeing fighting games come back to the forefront,
yeah,
and we're seeing like JRPGs, and like I like Capcom has done an amazing job invigorating their brand, because
yeah,
I think it was in the PS3 era in particular, and maybe PS4. I was like, dude, these old time Japanese gaming, like gaming companies would. I thought they were all going to end up like Konami, which, just doing pachinko machines. And even Konami's now coming back, and they're putting out some of their legacy stuff. And there's rumors going around that they're going to like reboot Metal Gear Solid and things like that. And it's just like, I love that, because the Japanese are just weird and they do things differently. And I want that in our industry. But anyway, that's kind of another thing. A whole, probably can do a whole show about the Japanese gaming.
No, you're
Scene.
right though. There is a lot of JRPG turn-based games out, and I think that's
Boingo remake.
I think that's just going to be a constant. I guess though, the question is where are we going to see anything new in terms of, no, there's no answer to this. I'm just saying this as a general statement. Are we going to see anything new in terms of gaming evolving into new experiences, or are we going to continue with the same game engine, first person shooter, isometric top down, third person shooter? Where are our new experiences? Maybe VR is where it's at, maybe it's not. Maybe Nintendo with their new whatever it's going to be is going to give us some new experience of some sort. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Wii bowling, that was the last time we had anything.
So the last question, Kevin, is gaming over?
No.
It's not over.
It's never been better, really, if you think about it, because you can play all the old stuff that happened before. So while the culture may have been more fun back then, you still have access to all of those games. And boy, I'll tell you, emulation wise, you can get everything online now. It seems like nobody cares that all these old games are online for people to download. You can go on Amazon and buy like a mini Android system that runs like 110,000 stolen games on it for $100, and nobody cares. Like nobody's cracking down on any of that. It's amazing. Like that didn't happen when we were younger. Nintendo saw any of that going on. They were like, sending every lawyer under the sun to shut these things down. Now you can just find them on Amazon. Like, and nobody cares.
Oh yeah,
and
they sell them on Instagram all the time.
But I do think that we're going to have a slowdown. Let me just say that. I talked about that earlier. I think that's going to happen. We're not going to feel it right now, because not all these things take time. But I think that in about 3 years or so, it's going to get a little bit stale, and I think like money is going to be maybe more of an issue for people as their credit cards and things get a little bit more maxed out and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's going to tighten how many game sales have. I don't think we're going to be setting records on game sales, and maybe free games are going to be more of a thing because people are going to go on there, but they're going to be selling less skins and things like that because money's going to get tight, and it's just going to be for a while. It's going to be like that for like 10 years, and maybe we'll get maybe the slower this is, maybe we'll get better experiences out of it because maybe we're getting too much junk right now and it's making us a bit jaded. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know.
We'll have this conversation again in 10 years.
Yes.
See where we're at.
Yes, we will.
Hey man, well, thanks for sticking on with me. I appreciate it. It's what, 10:30 over there right now?
Yeah, 10:31. It's all good.
Okay, cool. If people want to find you and Oblast, you tell people where you can find you.
Yeah, if you want to listen to myself and Don Anderson and occasionally a guest talk on our show, it is easy to find. Just do a search in whatever podcast tool you use. Just look for Oblast. So it's just the letter O and the word blast as one word, Oblast, and you'll find it. It's Kevin's Oblast Radio, it's a weekly show, and we just talk about everything under the sun. I mostly complain about things that are on the Disney Channel. Don, I don't understand because the guy doesn't want to watch any of the new Star Wars shows because it's not the Star Wars he grew up with, which is fine. But then he also doesn't like any of the Marvel stuff anymore because it wasn't the Marvel stuff he grew up in. And then I just imagine him just like sitting in the dark with his arms folded, TV's off, just frown on his face.
Why are all of your friends they're just so sad?
It's just curmudgeon. I don't know, man. I think as you get older, people get set in their ways. I'm sure he's still watching wrestling,
Yeah.
That stuff never dies for him. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you, man, and thanks so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, it's great fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, dude. Anytime. You have a good rest of your night.
You too. Take it easy.
All right. Bye.